We're so glad you're here. I'm Tony Collins again, board chair for the Southwest Renewal Foundation. I just want to welcome you again to our to this event. I think we have some wonderful information that you'll certainly be interested in. And I wanted to just bring our ward representative forward to Monica Peters.
Thank you, Tony. And thank you all so much for being out here today. We are right smack dab in the middle of Southwest quadrant of High Point, Ward 3. And I'm so honored that y'all could all be here today. And I really want to, well, it's been really great. I've had so much fun with these planners this week and last month when they came and I was able to meet them. Makes me want to go back and do it again and be a planner. So it's been really super exciting. And I also want to just really give a huge thank you to Dorothy Darr and her entire Southwest Renewal Foundation. Thank you so much. Number one, well, there's lots of things to say about them, but number one, they wrote the grant that facilitated this. So thank you so much for us having Dover Cole here. So anyway, so now I'd like to introduce Dorothy Darr, the Executive Director of the Southwest Renewal Foundation.
Thank you. I don't like to speak in public, but thank you so much for coming. It's so good to see all of you and our elected officials. There's so many out here. Kay Cash, and we got this. The reason Dover Cole's here is because of the county. And the county said, yes, we will help you plan this district and design this district as a modern day inner city manufacturing business park where people live and work. So Kay, raise your hand and just say hello to everyone, our county commissioner at large. And then we have Britt Moore, who was being introduced last time. He was at Wesley Hudson. We have Monica, of course. We have Sandy Dunbeck, who's kind of like an elected official. Who else? Oh, Jay Wagner, our mayor's here for the second time. Who else is our elected officials here? Heidi, I feel like she is. Greg Ferguson's back there. He's our deputy assistant city manager. We're just so happy. If I missed someone, please forgive me. We're just so happy to have you all here. Dover Cole, Victor Dover, who's speaking to you today, is the founder and principal of Dover Cole Urban Planners and Designers. I didn't realize that some firms are just planning, some firms are planning and design, which they are. He's been in the business 35 years. He's done projects all around the United States and globally, Eastern Europe. So he's just he just fits this area so well. They turned it up. And so we're just so proud to have Victor Dover. So without much ado, he deserves more ado, but here's Victor Dover.
Thank you, Dorothy. Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Dorothy's introduction focused on me and was very generous, but I have to say, the work I get to show you over the next few minutes was really the work of Margaret Flippen, our project director, and her team, Amy Groves, Kenneth Garcia, and Robin Crowder, and Marise Chael. They did all these amazing drawings and things we get to show you. We have right here a bunch of fresh ink. I seem a little breathless. It's because I'm about to show you a presentation that no human has ever seen before, from the beginning to the end. We're all going to see it for the first time. But we were literally putting finishing touches on things just a few minutes ago. And so I want you to think of it that way because it's all draft work. Could everyone please repeat after me? Draft. Okay. All right, Mayor, there. That's plausible deniability for all you and Wesley and the other elected officials and Andy and Sandy and the other staff members in the room. We reserve the right to get a good night's sleep and think about it and change our mind about some of the things that we've got here so far. But there's one thing I won't change my mind about, and that's that this is a very special, a unique place in a unique time. You come away from this effort unable to shake the feeling that we have a model for the 21st century for many, many communities in the making in High Point. And it's partly because people have inherited these properties or bought these properties who respect them in a way that maybe a previous generation of real estate actors would not have. They see them for what they are, as remarkable artifacts of the history of this place. They're message sending devices, not just square footage or commodity space or acreage. And that we learned from them as we talked with many of the owners and their neighbors over the last few days. I can't get over the sculptural effect after they trimmed the sawdust pipes there. Another impression that we can't shake is that the opportunity is so deep here because there's a tremendous amount of elbow room. Industry needed elbow room around it, and room to move a lot more trucks, or room to lay out a lot more materials in the outdoors, to do whatever came up with a quick and expedient addition to a building, and so on. And it was a different time, and they were not being really careful or conservative with the amount of acreage that they absorbed for a given number of workers, or number of products, or return on investment. So the result is that it's all a little spread out. The advantage is that there are so many wonderful things simultaneously occurring in and around the Southwest. The disadvantage is that getting from one to another still feels a little awkward because the public spaces, the public realm Dorothy speaks about, is lacking. It's missing, partly because of the giant lost spaces between things. The places where there's a fallow vacant lot, or a parking lot right up to the back of the sidewalk, or an empty or underutilized property. But as those things start to fill in and the city stitches itself back together, you're going to see that begin to change. And part of our challenge this week is to look at these areas and imagine how that lost space might be filled in an orderly and smart way, in a planned way, but not overly planned, so that there's flexibility for every generation to put their stamp on what comes next. There's also a real sense for us as outsiders coming in, carpetbaggers from Coral Gables, or itinerant Methodist ministers on horseback, we're sometimes called, that we're not starting from the beginning. This story began long ago and has been unfolding for generations. This latest chapter, the renewal chapter that the Southwest Renewal Foundation and others, including your leaders, have ushered into place, has been underway for quite a while. And there's evidence of it, like the impressive demonstration segment, the starter kit for the Heritage Greenway. That's already there. Now, the industrial areas of cities 100 years ago were probably looked upon, especially by people who lived in smoke-free and fancy neighborhoods in another part of town, a little bit like the way in an old house you'd look at the coal cellar, or the boiler, or the furnace, or the plumbing behind the wall, or the wood pile out in the back and off to the side. Utilitarian and necessary, but not the pretty part of your home. Maybe a little gritty, maybe not quite as clean as the other parts of your home, right? But necessary in the days when we heated our homes with coal from coal cellars, for example. But today, making things is no longer that dirty business. It's possible to, especially in small scale manufacturing, which is the focus here for the future, to have very clean making of things, non-toxic industries, and ways of filling in around those people who are busy making the stuff with the people who create the ideas for the stuff, or run the business, or market the business, or design the work. So now the what you call the modern day business park would, for example, not be a place you'd avoid living, because it can have places where people make stuff and the places where they live right close together, so they have the shortest possible commutes. So when we look at that big map, which is more or less running from the railroad tracks on the north and west, the creek on the south and west, and Main Street on the east, we see tremendous opportunity for filling those things in. Now, we had to decide where to focus. As I mentioned, there are a lot of good things underway. Some of them underway in those old mills where people like John and Ridvan and Rudy and Eric and others are busy investing, transforming the space, putting them into new uses. That's all going very well. And you're farther along than a lot of your peer communities on that transformative refilling process. The city is doing its part with the 300 Oak Incubator right in the middle of the map, where you see the letter A, to catalyze that transformation and accelerate it by supporting startup businesses. And so we don't need to come in and say, you should do those things, because you already know you should do those things. You're already doing them. So we thought, well, how can we help? And the answer is, all around each of the isolated events I just described, there are opportunities for other things to be done that would improve it. And there are many places an urban acupuncturist would notice need just a little healing, just a little spot touch in order to be catalytic. So we've been looking for those. As you look around the legacy buildings and properties, like this backside of the 300 Oak Incubator I mentioned a minute ago, you can see all kinds of evidence of the generations that went before who put one brick on top of another or nailed one board to another in order to create the place where they could make things in the simplest and easiest, most expedient possible way. That meant, for their era, locating these kinds of spaces next to the rail line. Now, move fast forward into our era, when we're going to have creative people and folks who are making the shortest possible trips, and the small scale manufacturing, and showing off all that work to your visitors from around the world, not just twice a year, but all year. Well, that means you want those things to be right next to the Greenway, where people can take a beautiful walk through the most scenic and attractive experience you can have in this part of town, and end up in the space where all that making and creating is going on. So it's hard not to imagine, in a before and after sense, what some of these spaces are likely to become. Now, in this room about a month ago, many of you participated in a smartphone poll. If the technology does what it should do, we'll do another one today, where we asked you to type in and send a text message with one word that comes to mind about the Southwest today. And you were all very generous and quick with doing that. I'm really encouraged to see that in this word cloud, where the bigger, bolder words are the ones that came up most often, the biggest one is opportunity. Now, the joke here is an mean old joke about Brazil. It says, Brazil has a lot of potential and it always will. So in that sense, we don't want to be, you can just insert the country that you wish to make that joke. We don't want to be like that, where we have potential, but we don't act on it. So opportunity, yes, but then what comes next? Other things that popped up sound similar, like promising. Then you see one of the biggest words, historic. It would be a shame for you to go through what's undoubtedly going to be an amazing period of prosperity and progress and lose your soul. So the devotion to the historic buildings and to the idea that the public spaces can improve while their historic backdrop remains true to itself is a really crucial idea. One of the mill owners asked if there was a coating they could use to clear coat over the rust so that they could keep that beautiful rust color, but seal the smokestack or the metal pieces. And I thought that was a great sentiment, because they realized that there was magic in the rust, that the rust wasn't something to hide in the coal cellar anymore. It was something to show off and shine a spotlight on and say, look at us, we make things here. Now, we also asked you to name one word that comes to mind about this place in the future, in your vision. And this was also very revealing. Vibrant, green, connected, revitalized, sustainable, destination, that's an interesting one. Togetherness shows up. Community. Well, there it is, potential. So hopefully we still always have potential for the next great things, large or small, but we haven't failed to act on it. We benefited from the generous time spent with us by your community leaders. Tony Collins, thank you for your tours. A couple of times I asked him late at night, take me to that street, let's go see that street corner, let's go see what's really going on down there. And you said, sure, let's go do it. And thank you for that. So we were learning from you, Dorothy, about what you've all experienced in this place for a really long time. You are not just tour guides, you're living it, and hopefully what you see in the pictures is your plan. The Greenway itself, we see as a project full of possibility that is only partially realized because, well, for one thing, although it has all the pieces and parts, it has a great, beautiful, smooth paved trail for running and walking and biking. It has public art. It has a green backdrop. There's still more to do with the gardening of that space and to wake it up as a linear park. But the real potential of it will be realized when it connects to a bigger system. When you have a network of trails, when the trail itself has grown longer and more complete and connects to the other similar trail systems around town and all the way to the multimodal transfer center where people are coming into the market. As you take a bike network in particular and start to hook it together into a network so people can go more places using it without worrying about getting killed on a busy city street, the number of people doing so will keep multiplying. And so you can't really just build a line or a stick on the map. You have to build a network to really see that full promise realized. Someone suggested a name that was rooted in industry. Maybe it could be called the Supply Line or some other catchy brand. That's a project to do for another day. We didn't try to come up with that. But but Heritage Greenway does say it all. It's about the past and the future, and a greener future at that. So Margaret and Robin and Kenneth and the others took the drone out and were flying it around to look at all of these components from a high angle so we could zero in. We got a couple of really beautiful pictures of how pretty it is in places, how intriguing and interesting it is in others, and also we got a couple of shots that might be called aerial indictments of the existing conditions. I'll just, spoiler alert, I'll tell you one. The video clip of the actual human trying to cross Main Street on foot was one of those aerial indictments. And it's a long video clip, Mayor. It takes a long time for that person to finally get their chance to play the game of Frogger, getting across Main Street. And maybe there's something we can do about that. So we've collected a lot of these pictures, and they will all be available, Dorothy, for folks to pore over and examine and compare to the older ones. We did go also back through history another way and look at the old maps. You know, planners use maps like doctors use x-rays. And I was struck looking at the 1954 transportation map. It's a street map. All it had on it was streets. And so that was right around the time when city planning was divorced from transportation planning or land use planning, economic development, parks and recreation. Those all used to be one function in the early days of the planning profession. And they got pretty much split up. And transportation and public works and DOT and so on took over their part of it, which is the street part. And the folks who run planning and zoning and the comprehensive plan took over their part of it, amazingly in separate silos and with little dialogue between them. So what happened next in America is not too surprising, but it's illustrated. So if we went back even further to the 1917 map, this is a fire insurance map done of the area in 1917. You can see kind of several pieces of it put together on that side. I'll zoom in, and you can see these little yellow boxes. Those are the small houses that line the street, small and large. This is an illustration actually of the way we built cities when we were poorer but smarter, because the houses here are not so big. Many of them are just simple shotgun houses built in the railroad days. But look where they're positioned on their lots. Those front porches, which were always a feature, whether it was of a big house or a small one, those stoops on the front were within conversation distance of the sidewalk. So this would be a place where you're likely to get to know your neighbors. And if you misbehaved in the street, somebody's mama was likely to tell your mama that you were doing that. Now here's an aerial photograph. This is one you're going to want to look at more closely on your computers at home. We'll give this PowerPoint show on the website for you to do that. 1958, prior to urban renewal and the highway building binge. And actually, when we zoom in on this map, you can see it's amazingly intact. It wasn't just a few yellow boxes here and there like in 1917. It was thick with buildings. And everybody wasn't driving everywhere for everything in those days. Lots of people walked. The industrial area was always paired with a residential neighborhood. that had not just a small number, but a very large number of people living close by so they could work in those mills and use their skills in those mills every day. Well, you go forward to 1970 and you can see it starting to dissipate. You zero in on this map, go a little bit further forward, here's 1982. You see all the gray parts getting bigger and grayer? Here's 2014, here's 2022. The map just gets grayer and grayer as we go. And what was happening there was the roads were getting wider, the parking lots were getting bigger, the buildings were getting fewer, and the urban renewal slash and burn slum clearance process was resulting in the sweeping away of lots of houses, but also families and households and businesses that were in the area. So it is a little shocking to watch when you go through these historic maps from 1917 to 1950 to 1958 to 1980 to 2014 to 2022 to see what happened. It's not unique to High Point, you know that. It's happened all over our country. But it is a reason why you have as big and open a canvas as you have today. So it wasn't just industry leaving and occasionally pulling down a building as they left. It was also government, with all the best of intentions, perhaps, doing the thing it does, one big, well-funded project at a time, sometimes with the high-octane federal match that was common in the days of the transportation spending binge. And you can see what happens to streets like Main Street. It's actually a little deceiving because those look like, well, 2 lanes in each direction and a center turn lane. But what you realize when you go out there on foot and you measure it is that even though a normal car lane is 10 feet wide, that center lane is 16 feet wide and plus and more. And the lanes on either side 13 and 14 feet wide and sometimes more. So in every case, everybody just got a little bigger with the gray parts and a little smaller with the green parts. The aerial photographs show Main Street when it was tree lined all the way into town. And it was faced by some of the most beautiful homes in town where the supervisors lived. So here's Main Street. Come back to that. My wife, Madi Chael, and the rest of our team, she's an architect, set up on and around the front porch and the sitting rooms over at Pandora's Manor. And what a gift it was to sleep upstairs this week and work downstairs in that space. We had the shortest commute in the history of city planning. And then we fan out over the neighborhood and take a look at things. And Mayor, thank you for stopping in and looking over our shoulders and challenging us to do our homework as we started testing ideas. I'll just show you one of those ideas. Remember I said we were wondering, well, what are the small acupuncture-like things you could do, little interventions you could make that might change things? We walked out to the corner of Green and Oak here. That's that street that curves from the left through the center of the picture and disappears in the distance in the center right is Green Drive. And I said, wait a minute. Did they mean to name it Green? Because there's one street tree, just one. You can see it in the far distance. But it's mostly gray. And you stand there and take that scene in for a minute and you realize that you're at the top of the hill. Monica, I think you pointed this out to us first. And you look to the south and it's dropping downhill. To the west, to the east, to the north, same thing. Quite dramatically to the east and west as we're looking here. And so what's behind me and to my right, when I stand in this location, is the top of the hill. And of course, there used to be a building here. The fire insurance maps clearly show it. I did notice a trend this week when I asked the property owners, why is that parking lot that size? Like, how did you know how big to make it? Their answer was interesting. In other cities, it would be, well, that's the size the city made me make it, because that's what the zoning regulations require. Thankfully, the city of High Point has already started done a great deal to reform old burdensome regulations like the minimum parking requirements. So that wasn't the reason. Why is it that size? Well, because that's how much land we have. The parking lots became the size they were because the asphalt was just brought out to the edge of the pavement or to the edge of the sidewalk. In other words, it's a no mowing area as opposed to a parking area. And that's what, and of course, the beautiful Victoria in the background suggests to you what this street scene was really originally meant to be like. And of course, pregnant with possibilities. Now, turn our gaze just a few degrees clockwise, and we're looking at the old Green Oak Bar site, originally a corner grocery store, obviously, and has that classic American mercantile form that Benjamin Briggs would tell us to find in his books. We heard the stories about the biker bar and other things that were in here in the meantime. We learned from one person who's grown my age that his parents said, "You don't go in there. That's not for you." So this isn't new, that it's kind of fortified. And what you'll see when you look at the picture is that originally there was a storefront right there. It's gonna rock again when I step off it. Originally there was a storefront there, and they blocked it up, and they left a window. But then they came back and they blocked up the window, and they did the same thing all the way around the building, until in the end we have a hermetically sealed and empty box. Looking at it from above, you can see it's just one small thing. It's not like the 64,000 square foot floor plate mill over here that has 4 floors that big, or the 150,000 square feet of something to be reused over there. It's little. It's just a little tiny building. But it's in a position where it can make a lot of difference. So I went back out there at night, and Tony was laughing at me. I said, "Watch the traffic for me so I can take this picture from stepping out in the street." And he said, "There's no traffic. You don't have to worry about that." So I took this photograph of the existing conditions, and I brought it into our makeshift studio over at Pandora's Manor and handed it to Kenneth Garcia. And Kenneth, in a few hours, made this. Before and after. What if? There's nothing really radical about that. Just pop some holes in the building and turn the lights on inside. In fact, we don't really know what would be inside a building like that. Maybe it could be this. Maybe it could be that. There's any number of possibilities. Could even be a bar again. I did, when we're running out of time, but I did ask Kenneth to put one of the Sons of Anarchies or Hell's Angels guys in the front and the big old Harley Davidson, just to remind everybody what it used to be. And we didn't have time. But maybe we'll do that as a follow-up task. So what do you think? Could you actually make a big difference with a thing like this? The reason I think you could is because of where it sits. When we look at it from down the hill, that little green light in the distance is the eerie green cast that's thrown on the building by the adjacent streetlights, like it's set from a zombie movie. If we light that up, you'll be able to see it from half a mile away in 2 directions and a quarter mile away in each of the 2 other directions. And the effect of that would be like a little lantern or a beacon of optimism in the distance. So I show you this picture partly because I wanted to get used to the after picture in the before and after set. So now you're used to the idea. And then when we could turn it back into the before conditions, it seems downright criminal to do nothing. It's okay, that was manipulative, but that's why we do it that way. But what I realized is that while we wanted to make an illustration of what it would look like as a symbol of confidence and progress, the existing conditions are a powerful message sender as they are. A kind of message of a lack of confidence, or that there's something wrong. What's wrong with this picture might be the caption. Margaret? You like the pianos? Okay.
So when we were together at the end of January, we did some on the site polling, and this is really helpful to us just to get some immediate feedback. That's something that everything that we're showing today is a draft, and there's several more images to come in our presentation this afternoon. But if you all remember, if you don't mind, and if you don't have a phone or a smartphone with you, you can also just turn to a neighbor and hopefully share as a group. But if you could please text to 22333, and in the body of the text, Dover Coal 516. So DOVERKOHL 516. All right. And then you should get a text back to you.
No need to click on what you get next.
All right. So
So recipient of your text message is 22333. And the message you're sending is Dover Coal 516. Everybody got
All
it?
right. Did everyone get like this? That you
Anybody
joined
need
this
need a
session?
minute more?
Everyone good? Okay. Yeah. Don't click on that link there. Okay. So when we ask the next question, you're going to type in your answer. So let's see what we got. Okay. Oh, okay. So would you like to see more street-oriented buildings in the Southwest? So you can type in A if your answer is yes, B if your answer is maybe, or C if your answer is no. So would you like to see more street-oriented buildings in the Southwest, like what Victor just showed, with doors and windows facing the street, turning the lights back on in some of the existing structures?
Well, there has to be at least one person who answers maybe. Then we'll
Victor.
know it's working. Okay. These questions are a little bit like the SAT, where they start off really easy
All right,
and then they
it's
get
working, it's
harder as
working.
we go. The hardest questions at the end. If you change your mind and you send another message, it'll change your answer to your new answer. I'm starting to feel a little bit of a mandate on this question. Everybody have a chance to answer? Okay. Here comes the no. All right. Okay. That was encouraging.
All right, there's going to be more questions to come. All right, you good?
Yeah.
You got one?
Thank you. Now let's move down the block, just a few hundred feet to the south of where we just were, and we come to the spot where the city has bought the old mill at 300 Oak Street and the adjacent office space and some open land in the courtyard and across the street. And for those who have been watching this story, it's a pretty exciting thing. The city's made a big, substantial investment. The Green Incubator businesses, or incubators, business incubator, it's called. There's a vision for rehabbing the building to kind of bring back its fit with the neighborhood where people made things. And as I understand it, Sandy, the objective is not just to create some space where people can make things and share equipment, but also to wrap around their effort with services, the assistance that they might need, like on getting their business plan right and marketing and promotion, and to create a little colony or community of people who are involved in similar things who can share off one another. So one exciting aspect of this is that it's targeting not just the people who make the stuff, but also the people who design the stuff, because they could live and work close together. So we started taking a look at the adjacent real estate. You'll see at the top of the picture the big sod-covered lot behind the chain link fence that's across the street to the east, and this band of trees that arcs across the picture just south of the buildings is the railroad right-of-way where the greenway is intended to go. So that when you stand down on that railroad right-of-way and cross the street and approach those buildings, you'll come to that courtyard I described before. So here we're standing in the old railroad right-of-way, the future such as it is, and looking toward the future courtyard, where the city has an amazing vision for how that space can be transformed. I'd like to tease and say there's no place we can't revitalize with enough string lights and craft beer. But the fact is that if it becomes a people place again, it'll be a great experience for folks to come down the greenway, walking or biking from Market or from the train station or the bus transfer center and enter into that space. So those places are not very far apart, but they feel farther apart than they are because of the design of the environment. The greenway changes all of that. So that's the before picture, the existing conditions, and you see in a place like that evidence of where there were pieces of buildings that were removed and the kind of ever-changing history. in that space. Maybe we're a little bit like archaeologists reaching back in time and shaking hands with any number of engineers and architects in the past in that space. Now, just work our way down Green Street a little bit on that same block, the upper right-hand corner of your picture. There's a lot of fallow land, which is paired with the old mill across the street on Green. So I was saying to the owners, that's sort of the holy grail of the new urbanism, both sides of the street under common control, so that what grows on both sides could have synergy and common operation. If we go up and look at it from above in the map, the 300 Oak Incubator is here. This is the greenway arcing across, and the fallow land I was just showing you is at the intersection of Grimes and Green on the left side. So then Amy Groves made a map, first the existing conditions. The darker gray is existing buildings. The light gray is existing parking. The yellowish color is something else, generally fallow land. And then she started imagining change over time in these places. Like after you turn the lights on in the old buildings, what next? Well, you build the missing companion to that building across the street. So a space like this could be used to right-size the parking lot, not get rid of it because you need parking, but add live-work units or new dwellings that front the greenway. So of course, every time we open up windows and balconies and storefronts toward the greenway, we make it safer because there will be eyes on the park. And then a next step, here's a sketch that Marty did illustrating that idea, starting in kind of a tactical way with planters and pots and then working your way up to the bigger, more expensive things. Then that triangular or guitar pick shaped site that's immediately south is another one that would lend itself to strategic infill, new buildings from the greenway. These are sized for any combination of flexible spaces or plus parking, plus live work townhouses. So as we start to add 24-hour occupants to this space, we'll be making it safer with each one we add. And then a longer range version of that shows the effort starting to extend its way up onto Green Drive itself. And the green colors you see on the map are the segments of the greenway falling into place. So now back up to the aerial view, we were just looking at this intersection here. So what started as a sketch and a map then turned into a little more elaborated sketch. What if you made Green Drive green again? Turns out there's a grant to do exactly that, to implement the missing street trees, to peel back some of the asphalt, to add rain gardens and other modern day tools to treat the stormwater and clean it before we let it run off into the creek. And overnight, Kenneth Garcia made this new version of that picture, before and after. What we're illustrating is the idea of building your way out of your problems, partly in the public realm and in the street, and partly on the private properties, because all development is a public-private partnership. And what we're setting out here is a kind of part for the city to do, a part for philanthropy and the nonprofits to do, and a part for the private owners to do over a long period of time. Zooming on that map just a little bit, here's the existing intersection of all of the oversized lanes. Well, what does that mean? It means when you try to cross the street, that's also an oversized crosswalk. And then when you fix the dimensions, look how much smaller it gets before and after. So as a pedestrian, you'd be sent a message there that you're welcome to walk in the neighborhood, to go from showroom to showroom, or to get to work, or to get to home or school. And then zoom in a little bit closer. One of the details in that sketch is and yes, it's raining in that picture, that's on purpose, is the idea that the stormwater, which has got to go somewhere, it needs to be slowed down and slowly reabsorbed and discharged gently into the watershed. That way it'll be cleaner when it goes there. So the longer we can hold onto the water close to where it lands, the more of those particulates drop out and the cleaner the water will be when it's finally discharged. So but just in case you were wondering, all that on-street parking, you can use it a lot of different ways. You can This wasn't really obvious at first, so I asked Kenneth to put in a couple of trucks, and it still wasn't obvious, so I asked him to put a couple of husky guys carrying a big red leather couch. Thank you, Kenneth, for putting up with my stuff. But yes, we know that a couple times a year there's going to be a lot of these parking spaces that are used by people who are loading and unloading from the street for special events. And then when you get right down on the ground in that scene, you can see what those rain gardens look like. It's a very simple technique for just letting the water that's collecting anyway on the adjacent properties and on the right of way stop and visit with us for a little while in the rain gardens before it's discharged into the storm drains. Y'all like that idea? Seeing some nods? Okay. Now, this story keeps unfolding as you move down the railroad tracks and into potentially mill after mill. And for those who've been following the story of this Heritage Greenway I've been talking about, eventually it will form a loop that connects many destinations together. So if we can improve the streets, and we can build the greenway, and we can make the lost space productive, we'll be networking in the way and making connectedness in the way that I described in the first place. So one of our drawings is about this big blue-green network, and we'll be elaborating more on that. After showing you the old Green Oak bar or Steinway shop, whichever you prefer, I couldn't help but notice there are many of these. You know, as we move around the neighborhood, it's not the only place where there's a very small building that's holding the corner. It's not quite dissipating to just parking. And whether that building was also day-lit or replaced by a new one that had doors and windows facing the street is not really the point. The point is street-oriented architecture. When we get to this point in the Greenway down near the Myrtle Desk complex, the Greenway itself starts to change. The old railroad right-of-way, while still abandoned, is prettier. There are a lot more mature trees. It's flowering now. If you haven't seen it, go see these volunteers. And you begin to think of places like the Razorback Greenway, which didn't exist 20 years ago, but now is at the very top tier of such trails nationally. That's in Arkansas. They can do it in Arkansas. You can do it here. More elaborate examples around the country include the Atlanta Beltline, which basically it's the largest trail and transit infrastructure project in the country, much bigger than we would accomplish here. But what's happened is the Beltline itself is now a prestigious address. People advertise, live here, you live on the Beltline, or work here, you can take a run at lunchtime on the Beltline. And of course, there are famous examples like the transformation of the elevated rail in New York. My favorite is the High Bridge Trail, and not too far from here in Farmville, Virginia. If you haven't gone to see this example, go take a look. They had similar combination, the old mill buildings with their humility and wonder, and elbow room and old railroad right-of-way. So it's really, I guess, the message for you leaders about the Greenway is this. It will do the most good by far if it occurs where the old rail line is. So I don't know whether you are, but if you're starting to receive hints of any pushback or resistance or friction from the railroad, be reassured that's normal. That always happens with Rails to Trails projects. You can call up our friends at the Rails to Trails Conservancy and they'll tell you, happens every time. And then they'll tell you some of the railroads are easier to work with than others, and then you'll tell them which one yours is, and they'll say, yeah, that's not one of the easiest ones. But there's going to be a moment when you're tempted to just say, well, to heck with it, let's just implement something and give up on putting the Greenway where the railroad right-of-way is. And I'm here to urge you, based on the pictures you just saw, to keep it where you've been drawing it. It's in the right location. Or find some both-and scenario, not an either-or. Stick with it. When it comes to transpocracies, don't you like that word? They always tell you no 6 times before they say yes the 7th time you ask. So you got to keep pushing. Well, let's move down to the South Side neighborhood. Zooming on the 1958 map, it becomes even more obvious. Can you see the shadows cast by all of the homes that were in that area? Then we step through 1970, they're starting to be removed for urban renewal. Then by 1982, do you want to see that again? This is the sometimes called urban removal. The the older homes, the intact neighborhood was swept away and only partially built back. So now we have a fraction of the original population. We have by 1982 replaced some older homes for newer ones, but there's a loss here that you're still a trauma that this part of your community is still recovering from. 2014, 2022, not a lot of change between 1982, 2014, and 2022, is there? But there are some changes that are happening inside the buildings. For example, at the school here, which I'm told had a poor track record in the not too distant past, they've had a complete turnaround, and it's flipped to being a school of which everyone's very proud of what's going on inside. And there's an energy about the school and the Southwest Recreation Center that's undeniable if you're there. Now the surrounding streets, this is Cassell. That's not a Photoshop of a miniature truck. That's a full-size pickup truck in the middle of a road that was designed like an airport runway. So when I say I believe we have room to build your way out of your problems, it's partly by undoing over-engineered mistakes like that. So what would you do there? Mari Chael, who's an architect, started drawing pictures of ways you could make more variety in the housing. For example, reintroducing the small cottages, which because of that front porch and conversation distance of the sidewalk or balcony doing the same, have all the dignity of a big grand house. Okay, but they just don't have the same size or square or expense. And then coupling that with community gardens and more variety in the housing. This picture, more or less at Vale and George, but it could be any of a half a dozen similar locations in the immediate area, illustrates one on the left that looks like a big house, but is actually an apartment house with multiple units in it. And then, oh yeah, modeled after the house right just across the tracks. Thank you, Margaret. And then on the right side of the picture, row houses and live-work combinations like we've been talking about before. And there are street trees in this picture, and the illustration shows the idea of peeling back some of the asphalt there and chipping away where it's not needed for driving or parking, and forming new places to plant. So you could make a green tree-lined street out of it. And another one of her illustrations shows, and this will be interesting to the Growing High Point folks, building upon the tradition you have here for community gardens and for fresh and local food by expanding the community gardens into another site. And the drawing of the little architectural piece is a pavilion or garden building that would serve as the landmark of that space. So from uphill and down the street, you'd be able to look at that and see in the distance one of those inspirations of confidence. Can you tell we love before and after pictures? We don't have one for this one. We need to make one eventually, but this has the makings of another dramatic before and after picture. The 422 Tomlinson site, which is owned by the Southwest Renewal Foundation, the old mattress factory, is a case in point. This is a spot just right close to the other sites we were looking at. As you can see, not far from the heart of town and the market square in the distance on the right. And right adjacent to where the Greenway will come behind this building for something special in the neighborhood. That's another one of those beacons of progress. And we just purchased it. 1.5 acres. So just know. Are you afraid code enforcement is in the room? They're going to go right out of here. Yeah. So get ready and hold on, because this is about to become something really cool. Then there's potential in a box like this for adding to the amount of light that gets inside the building and adding things outside the building that will make it an attraction for the neighborhood. So here's an illustration of taking the loading dock side and making it the front and adding a barbecue pit that can be shared and bringing into the building arts and music. We love the idea that you've seized on the importance of STEM education, science, technology, engineering, math. But what a good thing it is for High Point when STEM becomes STEAM and we add arts to that list. Because nurturing the creative instincts of the kids in the neighborhood for after school arts and the seniors in the neighborhood who have things to teach in visual arts and music, that's the sort of thing that could be going on here. Already, some of which is already going on in the school and the rec center and can be expanded on in a spot like this. I think maybe Tanny suggested the name Lightbox. I love the idea that it could be, well, a little brighter than what we see today. And when we get up, this is the existing conditions drawing, and then here's Mari's elevations before, after. So what you're seeing is she hasn't taken a light touch to such a building as if it was the Taj Mahal or the National Capitol and has to be, treated as an inviolable piece of architectural history. It's just a simple utilitarian building from the American mercantile style. But we can do things like open up the windows more to get the light in the building, adapt for accessibility, and make it a symbol of progress. And Dorothy, when Madi was drawing the sketch, she couldn't resist putting the blue tarp on the corners of the drawing. So just let you know, we notice these things. So when you get up in the air and you look out on a map again, the existing conditions don't have the greenway, but we all know the greenway is meant to arc around this site. And there's potential, of course, for doing even more in that area. As we all wait to see what the fate and long-term future is for the heavy industries that are nearby, if you imagine that a future in which there's probably some site closer to interstate access and with better rail access where it makes more sense to make jet fuel additives, it's not hard to imagine that they'll eventually do that somewhere else. And when they do, all of those sites that I've been calling pregnant with potential will become easier to reuse. Was that diplomatic enough? Okay, just checking. I'm an approval seeker. I'm always asking. Okay, so now let's look one last example. And Benjamin, thank you for your books, which are full of examples of that American mercantile architecture all the way through the Art Deco period. Let's take a look at South Main Street. We were looking at the examples of how our great-grandparents and grandparents built High Point. They were really good at city building. They like to make non-fussy buildings that had simple rectangular foundations, but they made good buildings. And it's easy for me to imagine High Point reconnecting with that and doing more of that as you focus more and more on design. So when we get up in the air and we look down on Main Street, where I complained about the pedestrian taking so long to go across, we did a what-if sketch of how you might see the fallow land develop and how you might adjust the street itself so that it isn't so hard to go from the South Side neighborhood to, for example, the Guilford Technical Community College right across the street. So what if? That one's abrupt. Before, after. Before, after. So when we speak about building your way out of your problems, we're thinking about reestablishing that street edge that makes the street feel safe. Doors and windows and balconies, storefronts facing the street. And if you zoom in close on this, you'll also see the street itself has been resized. So and here's a scenario where this perhaps is the most radical scenario. You conclude, based on the numbers, that you really only need one lane in each direction. Sounds about right, actually, for the traffic that you have here, 50 weeks a year. And in this scenario, you'll also be wondering, well, where do I park in the center to unload on those other 2 weeks of the year? And how do emergency vehicles get around a stalled car in the travel lane or someone who's parking, things like that. And that middle stripe in the picture is no longer the butter smooth 16-foot wide airport runway two-way left turn lane, but what we would call a safety strip. It's given a heavy texture, like cobblestones or a rough texture, so you don't drive on it all the time, but you can get around something on it if you need to. You can park on it if you need to. That's called a safety strip. They did that in Lynchburg, Virginia. If they can do that in Lynchburg, you can do that here. You might, after looking at the numbers, decide, or after talking through the emotional politics of transportation, decide that you can't resize the street that much. You still want to keep 2 lanes in each direction and left turn lanes. And it's also possible just by sizing the lanes correctly to do that. So here are 2 scenarios we did quick sketches of for your thinking, mulling. Just we put this here to hopefully start a calm community conversation that has been started in the past, but not quite gotten to the point where you decide to do something. Margaret?
Will you go back? I just want to say one more thing about Robin's image for South Main Street. Will you go back to the one that shows the blue outline? A couple more back. Okay. So when Robin and myself and Marise and Tony, we were out there and we were really checking out Main Street and crossing over to GTCC and how difficult that was, but also watching the pattern of folks coming from the neighborhood. And there's a small store here on the end. And what I just wanted to add about this when Robin was working on it was we also talked a lot about a mix of building types and a mix of housing types. And something that I really like, even just looking at this blue and white image of these 2 parcels, was how you could have that variety of housing types. It doesn't just have to be one thing cookie cuttered over an entire site, but how you can go from a more urban along Main Street with some taller buildings to help to shape that street in the use of what goes on in those buildings, maybe ground floor retail or options for, oh, yeah, that's good. Okay, here. Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
You're doing great. Keep going.
But I really like how when Robin was designing this, she transitioned from a more urban type of housing into more of a lower scale townhouse or apartment complexes or moving so far into the single family residential. So that the street behind this area, that's Elm, which is also still a fairly wide street as well, but looking at some opportunity for duplexes, basically just to get some more variety of housing options in this area as well. All right, so
You read our minds and answered the question. You can change your mind.
okay, so I know we've gone through a lot of different images, a lot of before and afters. As Victor said, everything is still in draft form, but like I said earlier, we are looking for feedback. That's why we love this process. It's very iterative, and we will have some revisions following today. So we just sort of love to hear just some of your initial thoughts. We'll also have it available on the website where you can take a closer look as well at the Southwest Renewal Foundation. But the development around 300 Oak. So from your phone, you can still do A, like it, B, not sure yet, C, no thanks. But that was sort of the area where around this green incubator area, where over time you could see some infill development happening there with some new options with regards to live work and other buildings in that area as well. So that's that question. What do you think about infill development in the area around 300 Oak?
You can send in your text message answer. So is Elise listening and watching and running the smartphone poll? Yeah.
It's
Okay.
it's
All right, we
running.
got a not sure. There we go. Now we know it's working.
All right, you guys ready to go to the next question? Everybody doing good? Okay. Okay. What do you think about reconfiguring Green Drive to be a walkable, safe street? So the Southwest Renewal Foundation, in collaboration with the city, has worked really hard to get a grant to make Green Drive green again. And so in addition to that, that's going to come with a lot of stormwater and infrastructure improvements, but it's also a really great opportunity to make Green Drive a complete street, not just with of course, the importance of clean water and stormwater, but also an opportunity, as Victor showed, to narrow those travel lanes, still being able to accommodate the traffic, but also looking at a more humanized, right-sized street. Okay.
I'd like to say something about the poll, if I could.
Yeah.
And this is partly for the benefit of Wesley and Monica and Kate and Jay and the other elected officials. You all know this is not a scientific, statistically valid sample, right? This is a representative sample of people who are willing to come in on a Friday afternoon before the oyster roast and let us show pictures and what. So It doesn't mean this is an opinion that you could rely on as being similar to that of the voting public, does it? But it might be representative of something else. It's probably a pretty good representation of the sorts of people, or representative sample, of the sorts of people who will, months from now, give up some of another afternoon or evening to come to City Hall and attend your meeting and say, yes, we want to do this, or no, we don't want to do that. And so that's why we put so much emphasis on it. Well, if it's not a statistically valid sample, why do we do it? And it's because we want to start a better conversation. If you see, maybe your answer is maybe or your answer is yes, ask yourself, why am I saying that? What is the thing that pushes me to be unsure or sure? And then build that into the next conversation, because that's why we do it.
Thanks.
Getting a good bit of info on housing types.
Everyone have a chance to answer?
So, yeah. Well, so you have the example after the poll, but okay.
And then what do you think about reconfiguring South Main Street to be a better balance between pedestrians and vehicle travel? So this is a lot of times what we talk about is going from a lot of gray to a little bit more green. So balancing that out between automobiles and pedestrians. And also looking at South Main Street as a southern gateway into the city of High Point, and we're welcoming the living room of the city some opportunities to reconfigure South Main. Understanding with market and things like that, there would be more analysis with regards to transportation, but just the overall idea of what do you think about reconfiguring that street?
By the way, for those who are wondering, the only correct answer on the last question was not sure yet. What do I mean by that? Well, we didn't mention how much it might cost, or how we would pay for it, or what disruption it would cause, or how long it would take, or what we would do in what phases. There's lots of information you can't get just from the visual quick look at how cool it could be. So in fact, for many of those costly projects, I would think the right answer might be not sure yet. But what you really want to gauge is there enough interest that's worth going to the next level of investigation to dig into all those things and come back with those answers. So you can ask yourselves the question again with numbers and dates in front of you. Does that make sense? Okay. Last two questions. Yep.
So which ideas discussed today are most exciting to you? It's been really telling to us staying in the Southwest at Pandora's, and you may have seen us out taking photographs and walking around, but just the proximity of many of these locations within the Southwest. When you look at a map, everything, it's around 536 acres, I believe, Dorothy, the area. But once you get out and really start walking and, experiencing the various places, it has the opportunity to become very connected.
They're still flowing in, so let
That's
them
great.
go. I see Gloria still typing, so it's going to be a good one. Okay. So while we're doing this is a good point for me to ask. Do you like doing this? Is this helpful to see everybody else's answers at the same time and get a simultaneous read on whether your instinct matches your neighbor's? Okay. This is an alternative to that old model where we each have 3 minutes at the microphone and we stand there not listening to other people while we're memorizing what we're going to say before the bell rings and they cut us off. So that's why we like to do it. But I want to sense are you tired of it yet? Or you like doing this? Because we do have one more question.
But also when Victor and I and our team, we've been doing this for a while together now, and we used to always have the paper surveys, which are great. You can write down everything. But what would happen with those was we would take them back to our office, we'd read them, we'd scan them in. But then giving that feedback back to you all always took a little bit more time. So we always think this is kind of fun plus we kind of haven't had a lot of sleep this week. So this is really good for us to hear from y'all. But when we have had sleep, it's been very nice at Pandora's.
So I think
All right.
you reached the end.
Here we go. Okay, based on what you saw today, are the planning concepts, understanding that everything's still in draft form, do you feel that we're on the right track? This is probably our most important
So
question.
is it A for yes, B for probably yes, C for maybe, and D for no? Okay, that's pretty good. Well, that never happens. That's pretty rare, I have to say. I mean, it's something as emotionally charged as city planning and urban design and redevelopment and real estate and zoning. We hardly ever see that. So uh, give yourselves a round of applause for your help in getting to this point.
Well, I think that's also very telling of the collaborative community you all have here. We've been so impressed getting to know each and every one of you and being a part of this process. It's just been wonderful. So I think a question like this is also very telling for the enthusiasm and the pride and the commitment you all have for High Point and for the area. So we're grateful for that.
Margaret, what happens next?
So what happens next is we're going to return home early tomorrow morning. And what we're going to be doing next is working with Dorothy and the Renewal Foundation on a series of revisions. So what we want to do, as Victor said, everyone kind of sleep on it, think on it a little bit. So we want to have some time for everyone to sort of digest what we've presented today. Dorothy will be working to gather some feedback and then sharing that with us so that we can make some revisions. And then what we're hoping is that as things move forward with grants and collaborations with the city, looking towards implementation. So as part of this, we're also going to provide a summary of recommendations that will also be action oriented as far as next steps. We're also really excited talking with city staff. Is Heidi here? Oh, there you are. Okay. And Chris and Andy, the opportunity that the city of High Point is about to start their comprehensive planning process. And so I think as a community, you're going to be hearing a lot about that as well. But we're very excited to partner as technicians in that and sort of the work that we've been doing this week and the draft concepts to sort of feed into that comprehensive planning process. So we're excited about those opportunities as well. So that's our next step. And if you have any questions, there's Dorothy, there's the Southwest Renewal Foundation website as well as Dover Coal and Partners. But I want. Okay. Do you want to say any closing comments?
No, I just thank you so much. We've had such a great turnout this week. Just, just it's just been wonderful, and I appreciate so much you all stopping by the design studio, coming today. We had just a fantastic initial community presentation, and this final presentation. It's getting warmer, and people wanting to get away has been strong too. So, Katie, you want to say anything? You helped us. You funded this. Big.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I just sat here thinking about how exciting this is and how visionary it is, and the opportunity to participate in this discussion by so many different segments of the community. This is a real opportunity for community involvement, and it's a real opportunity to create a new day and a new vision for High Point. I think High Point's on a roll. Mr. Mayor left. There you are. There you are. Congratulations, Mr. Mayor and City Council people. But, you know, and Victor, thank you for bringing this opportunity here to High Point and to the whole community, to Guilford County, because we know wherever we are making progress in our county, everyone is going to benefit. So that's why we're all together in this. But most of all, I would like for us to give a round of applause to the wonderful Dorothy Dahl, for goodness sake.
But Kay was right. We did get an equally large grant that helped fund this process from the Department of Commerce, the North Carolina Department of Commerce. So we want to thank Cecil Brockman, our representative, and all of the representatives there as well. So thank you so much. Any questions of Victor and Margaret? We don't want to keep you too late. If everybody's probably ready to take off. Hey, Dot. Here's Dot Kearns. Dot's been our wonderful leader for so many.
I just want to say that what you've seen here is real growth. When Dorothy called me one day and said, "Would you just ride with me down through the Southwest area? Because that's my neighborhood. And I don't think anybody realizes what decline it is in." And I said, "Sure, I'll go down with you." Dorothy hardly knew how to plug the computer in now. I have never seen such growth as she has demonstrated. And it really is Dorothy's will for the Southwest to be a part of the whole of High Point. We don't want it to just be a segment down there that's still in decline. We want it to be a part of major High Point. And we certainly thank Dorothy for the great tenacity it has taken to get this far with it. Thank you.
Well, are we at the end, or does anyone else like to add a final comment? Maybe Dottie, you got the last word. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.